Good afternoon. My name is Charles Wallace. I'm a Historical Society member and a docent of the Anderson Township History Room. If you'd follow me, please, I'll introduce you to the room. As you can see by this large introduction map here, this is the state of Ohio. This area here is a Virginia Military District, and one little part of that is Anderson Township, that green area you see here. It's actually 36 different parcels of land given to soldiers who fought for the Virginia line during the Revolutionary War. If you come over here, please. People have lived in this area for a little under 14,000 years. After the glaciers receded, hunters came in. There's archaeological evidence that we've had people here that long. Some of the large mounds and earthen enclosures were very common in those days throughout Anderson Township. For the most part, gone now. There's very few left. But this was a very wild place. The points you see in this case here are all found on Clough Pike by a friend of mine named Christopher Clark back in 1958-59. These were on Clough between Nagel and 8 Mile Road. And basically, after farmers deep plowed their fields once a year, their father knew the farmers, and after a light rain, they would go walk the field. And he said these things were in such abundance, you just couldn't help but not find them. Two of them in the back here, these 2 points here, that one in the back, according to Bob Gemheimer, is 8,000 years old at least. Some of the rest of these are much newer points, 200 or 300 or 400 years old. Move along, please. Other parts here, other points, and other artifacts were donated to us by Gary Lee Hicks, a society member. As you can see here, the Turpin Frog, which is a fairly famous effigy pipe, the largest effigy pipe ever found in this part of the country. And there's a good story behind this. It's on the Anderson Township 225 videos online, and you can learn all about this. This long rifle here was donated to the room by a gentleman by the name of Lloyd Bridges. And John Bridges, his ancestor, came here in 1790. The first two settlers in this area were Samuel Welch and John Bridges, and that was his long rifle, 1790. As you can see, then the township started developing. This is the Miller-Lizer log house built in 1795 by Ichabod Benton Miller, who was buried in the Pioneer Cemetery across from Lucken Airport. And the James Clark house, built in 1802, 1803, has stone walls 18 inches thick, and the walls were actually angled, so when you're looking from the inside out, the outside is a little larger than the inside. And the reason for that was so that large objects, if you were attacked by Indians, large objects could be pushed up against these windows, and there would be firing ports on both sides with maximum range of fire to protect yourself. Not a very common occurrence in those days, but the news that the War of 1812 didn't reach this part of the country until about 1815, 1816. This is a very popular part of this room. It's an interactive display where you can see the downtown Newtown. There's the Newtown Feed Supply with that building next to it. And if you slide it over, this is the now. The then, there's the Newtown Feed Store. There's the same building. You can see the horses and carriages there. It's a dirt road. You can see places to tie up the horses here. And I always like to point out several instances in the now of Beechmont. This is Beechmont, and I believe this is Bernie. There's McNick down there. Back in 1915, there was a railroad track. The suburban traction line was coming up Beechmont. And there's GA there. McNick, of course, isn't there yet. But you notice the railroad. And the same thing over here. This is Beechmont. This is 8 Mile, where the Enterprise rental car is in those days, a suburban traction ticket office and waiting room. So if you wanted to go up to Bethel, or you wanted to go down to the bottom of Beechmont Hill, you could hop on the traction line. This is the now, this is the end. And the same thing here. This is 1915. This is the now. This is 5 Mile Road in Beechmont. I shot that picture sitting in my car because it was unsafe to do it any other way. But back in 1915, here's an old car here, and you can see the mailbox because there's houses there. The two houses in this general area are now right across from the library on State, right off of 5 Mile. This lady here gave this photograph in 1967 to Mr. Stephen Smalley, who was a longtime resident of Anderson Township and wrote thousands of articles about Anderson Township in the Mount Washington Press and other newspapers at that time. When Tom Brown and I were working on this room, designing this room in 2008, 2009, residents would call us up and they loaned or donated all the artifacts you see in this case. And I should point out that this wooden structure is actually 1/4 of a corn crib that was down on Clough Pike. It was taken apart back in those days. And we saw it as a great way to show all these items safely where people couldn't get hurt on the sharp. Hi, since Anderson Township is 225 years old, as you can imagine, the early transportation was pretty much all horses. We have several photographs. The Anderson Township Historical Society has a collection of photographs in the thousands. We have quite a few of horses. This particular house is still sitting on Forest. You can see his wonderful horses out in front. This is a man and wife and the baby being pulled by their horse. After horses, of course, came the first automobiles and then the first buses. This is the Anderson Township school bus. There was a fleet of these back when that building was built in 1929, and the 7 schools became 1 school. And then you can see other uses. Horses were still being used for collecting hay in 1916. This is 1920, a jitney service offering rides between Mount Washington and Linwood, which was across, of course, the Beachmont Levee. So if you'll come around here, please. Here's the only photograph we have of the Forest Hills Drive-In. Is that the name? I'm bad about that. Then the rest of these photographs here, this is the very first Ford or car agency. This was started in 1916 in Forestville. It's on Beachmont. This photograph was taken in 1923. That is Wolfangle. As you can see, it looks a lot different today, but that building was here until about 6 years ago when it was raised. Of course, it was added to and taken away from over the years, but it was around for quite some time. Over here. Getting back over to the artifacts that were donated or loaned by residents, Tom and I met with a lot of the residents. We would go out and we would pick up these various items. Some of these were already in the collection. The one I like to point out is this auger right here. This auger is how all these holes were made that holds this corn crib together. These were cedar pegs, and it was all post and beam construction, and all those holes were drilled with a device like that. Which is a lot of work when you think about it. But all the rest of these artifacts, again, were loaned and donated to this. Dr. Patzwald gave us this chart over here, a series of charts. This particular one is on botany. The old schools would have this in it. This is a fruit press donated by the Wolf family. The last wine produced was 1976. And I actually got to take a sip of it, which is actually good. It was a rosé, I guess. And this is an adding machine donated by the same family, the Wolf family. An old Wales adding machine, not a typewriter. The typewriter's down there, of course, from the Betts and Trapp Coal Company. The typewriter, the reason we put this in here, a lot of the kids in 2nd grade thought that was a typewriter. We wanted to clarify this. Here's an old Underwood, and if you look in that photograph there of a typing class in that Anderson school in 1932, this is the machine they're working on right here, same exact machine. If you follow me, please. And of course, we have World War I uniforms. This is some of the very first televisions. This television here is on loan to us from Nancy and Bob Mason. It's a 1947 RCA television. And I love this thing. Look how tiny the picture is on that. But if you look on the back side, there's a big bronze plaque that talks you all about how wonderful the speaker is, and it barely even mentions this new technology called television, because I'm assuming they didn't think it would really take off, but obviously it did. Come this way. And then here we, of course, have a continuation of that. Graph TV was kind enough to loan us a 1955 console TV and this small 1956 portable television. And then to the right of that is the very first remote, one of the earliest TV remotes from 1965, big clunky box. And then you can see all the photographs on the back there of the old Beachmont Mall from 1969. With the anchor stores with Shillito's on the west and Maybelline Crew on the right. And then right here you see school desks. These school desks date back to the late 1800s. Now you notice there's this particular one here where this Kleenex is. This is for an inkwell because the kids would write with quills back in those days. This is before pencils and pens and so forth. And sometimes to do quick math projects on, they would use this chalkboard. This chalkboard is well over 100 years old, a slate board. But these, matter of fact, these types of desks were in service when I was in school back in the 50s over in Norway. Back in the 2nd grades in the 1880s, the McGuffey Reader, each 2nd grader got 1 book a year, and this was the book they got. And every day they would work with this book, and they would have a spelling lesson, a vocabulary lesson, and they would read them a story. But things are a little bit different. And if you look over on this wall here, you'll notice a large reproduction of a 1993 bicentennial map of Anderson Township. And all those houses you see on the right-hand side are still standing where they are today. Hopefully, 25 years from now, they will be as well. So I'd like to invite you to come down to the Anderson Township History Room. It's open every Sunday afternoon from 1 to 4, year-round, when COVID-19 subsides. And the Miller-Weiser Log House, by the same token, is open the first and third Sundays from June through October from 1 to 4 as well. Thank you.